The air was thick with the scent of fresh paint and possibility as I stepped into my son's new home. The housewarming party was in full swing. Laughter and music spilling from the open windows into the warm September evening. I clutched the small, wrapped gift in my hands, a hand-stitched quilt I'd spent months crafting. Each square a memory of the life I'd built for my son, Daniel. At 72, my hands weren't as steady as they used to be, but the love woven into those stitches was unshakable. Or so I thought. The house was stunning. All sleek lines and polished floors. A far cry from the modest two-bedroom we'd shared when Daniel was growing up. Back then, it was just the two of us, me, Evelyn, a single mother working double shifts at the diner, and Daniel, my bright-eyed boy who dreamed of bigger things. I'd sacrificed everything to give him a chance at those dreams. And now, here he was, a successful architect with a home that screamed achievement. I was proud, so proud, but there was a hollow ache in my chest as I stood in the foyer, feeling like a guest in a life I'd helped create. Mom, you made it. Daniel's voice cut through the chatter. He strode toward me, his smile wide but fleeting, like a burst of sunlight before clouds roll in. At 35, he was handsome in his tailored suit, his dark hair neatly combed, his confidence filling the room. He hugged me briefly, his cologne sharp and unfamiliar, before turning to greet another guest, a colleague. I assumed, from the way they launched into talk of blueprints and deadlines. I stood there, clutching my quilt, smiling politely as the crowd swirled around me. The living room was a sea of faces, most of them young, polished, and loud. I spotted Daniel's fiancée, Claire, across the room, her laugh bright as she clinked glasses with friends. She was lovely, with auburn hair and a warmth that reminded me of myself at her age, though I'd never had her poise. I'd meant to talk to her, to tell her how happy I was for them, but she was swept away in the tide of the party before I could. I found a quiet corner near the fireplace, where I could watch the celebration unfold. The quilt rested on my lap, its weight grounding me as I took in the scene. Daniel was the center of it all, charming and animated, telling stories that drew laughter from his guests. I smiled, remembering the boy who'd once begged me to tell him bedtime stories about knights and dragons. But there was something different about him tonight, a sharpness in his gestures, a distance in his eyes when they briefly met mine. As the evening wore on, I felt more like a shadow than a guest. No one ignored me. Exactly, there were polite nods, a few kind words about my charming cardigan, but I was an outsider in this world of glassware and ambition. I sipped my sparkling water, wondering if I'd overstayed my welcome, when Daniel's voice rose above the din, calling for attention. Everyone, everyone, a toast, he said, raising a glass of champagne. The room quieted, all eyes on him. Thank you for coming to celebrate this milestone with Claire and me. This house site's more than just a building. It's a symbol of everything we've worked for, everything we've built. His gaze swept the room, landing on me for a fleeting moment before moving on. And, of course, we couldn't have done it without the support of so many people. And, well, even the old tenant who used to keep me in line. Laughter rippled through the crowd, light and careless. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The old tenant. The words landed like a slap, sharp and stinging. I forced a smile, my fingers tightening around the quilt. But inside, my heart twisted. Was that how he saw me now? A relic from a life he'd left behind. The room spun, the laughter blurring into a dull roar. But I kept my composure, years of resilience holding me upright. Daniel didn't notice. He was already moving on, clinking glasses with Claire, his words drowned out by the renewed chatter. I sat there, the quilt heavy in my lap, Feeling the weight of those two words, the old tenant, settle into my bones. They weren't just a joke. They were a dismissal, a reduction of everything I'd been to him. Mother, provider, protector. The woman who'd stayed up nights sewing costumes for school plays. Who'd worked until her hands ached to pay for his college applications. All of it, reduced to a punchline. I wanted to leave. To slip out quietly and let the party carry on without me. But something held me back. Maybe it was the quilt. Its stitches a reminder of the love I'd poured into Daniel's life. Maybe it was the flicker of hope that he didn't mean it. That he'd see the hurt in my eyes and make it right. So I stayed. My smile a fragile mask. Waiting for a moment to speak with him. As the night deepened, the guests began to thin out, leaving behind empty glasses and half-eaten hors d'oeuvres. I found Daniel in the kitchen, helping Claire stack plates. "Daniel," I said softly, my voice steadier than I felt. He turned, his expression distracted but softening when he saw me. "Mom, you're still here. I thought you'd head home by now." His tone was casual, but it cut deeper than I expected. "I wanted to give you this," I said, holding out the quilt. "It's for your new home. I made it for you and Claire." He took it, his fingers brushing the fabric, but his eyes were elsewhere, scanning the room for stray cups. "Thanks, Mom. That's really nice of you." He set the quilt on the counter, next to a pile of napkins, and turned back to Claire. "Babe, we need more trash bags." I stood there, the dismissal sinking in. He hadn't even looked at it. Not really. I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded. "I'll head out now," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't hear me. He was already laughing with Claire, the quilt forgotten. As I stepped into the cool night air, the weight of the evening pressed against my chest. I walked to my car, each step heavier than the last, wondering how we'd come to this, how the boy I'd raised had grown into a man who could call me the old tenant and not even notice the wound it left. The drive home was quiet. Save for the hum of the engine and the faint crackle of the radio I hadn't bothered to turn off. My little apartment, a modest one-bedroom in a senior complex, felt emptier than usual when I stepped inside. The walls were lined with photos Daniel as a gap-toothed kid, grinning at his first soccer game. Daniel at his high school graduation, his cap slightly askew. Daniel and me at his college send-off. My arms around him, both of us beaming. Those moments felt like another lifetime now, as distant as the stars blinking outside my window. I sank into my armchair, the one I'd had since Daniel was a boy, its faded fabric soft under my hands. The hurt from the housewarming lingered, a bruise I couldn't stop pressing. The old tenant. I replayed the words, trying to convince myself they were just a thoughtless joke, a slip of the tongue. But the way Daniel had brushed past the quilt, past me, told a different story. It wasn't just the words, it was the ease with which he'd said them, the way he'd moved on without a second thought. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, memories flickering like an old film reel. I thought of the nights I'd stayed up late, balancing the checkbook to make sure we could afford Daniel's art supplies. His dream of becoming an architect already clear in the sketches he'd leave scattered across the kitchen table. I thought of the mornings I'd woken up early to pack his lunches, slipping in notes that said, "You're my hero," because I wanted him to know he was enough. Always enough. Had I been enough for him? Or had I become just a footnote in his story? A tenant who'd once occupied space in his life. The next morning, I woke to a text from Daniel. "Thanks for coming last night. Mom, hope you had fun." No mention of the quilt. No hint of apology. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the reply button. But I couldn't find the words. What could I say? That his joke had cut deeper than he'd ever know. That I felt like I was losing him to a world I didn't belong in. Instead, I set the phone down and busied myself with the mundane watering my plants, folding laundry, anything to keep the ache at bay. Days passed, and the silence between us grew. I didn't call him, and he didn't call me. It wasn't unusual, we'd never been the type to talk every day, but this silence felt different, heavier. I wondered if he'd even noticed the quilt on his counter, if he'd unfolded it to see the patches I'd chosen, the blue from his old baby blanket, the red from his high school jersey, the green from the scarf he'd bought me with his first paycheck. Each piece was a thread of our history, a map of the sacrifices and joys we'd shared. Did he see that? Or was it just another thing to be tucked away, out of sight? A week later, Claire called. Her voice was warm, a little hesitant. Evelyn, I just wanted to thank you for the quilt. It's beautiful. I don't think Daniel realized how much work went into it. Her words were kind, but they stung, confirming what I'd feared. Daniel hadn't even looked at it. We'd love to have you over for dinner soon, she added. Just the three of us. I thanked her, my voice steady despite the tightness in my chest. That sounds lovely, Claire. Let me know when. But as I hung up, I wondered if dinner would change anything. Would Daniel see me as his mother? Or would I still be the old tenant, a guest in his shiny new life? I decided to give him space, to let him come to me. It wasn't easy. Every instinct screamed to pick up the phone, to demand an explanation, an apology. But I'd spent my life putting Daniel first. And maybe now, I needed to let him find his way back to me. So I waited, filling my days with small routines, morning walks in the park, knitting scarves for the community center, reading novels that let me escape into other people's lives. One afternoon, while sorting through old boxes in my closet, I found a sketchbook of Daniel's from high school. The pages were filled with drawings of houses grand, impossible structures with spiraling towers and glass walls that caught the light. On one page, he'd written in his messy teenage scrawl, "For Mom, the best home I'll ever have." My throat tightened, and I closed the book, pressing it to my chest. That boy was still in there, somewhere, wasn't he? The weeks stretched on, and the distance between us felt like a chasm. I started to wonder if I'd been wrong to stay silent, if I should have confronted him that night at the party. But every time I reached for the phone, I stopped myself. What if he didn't care? What if the man he'd become had no room for the mother I'd been? Then, one chilly October evening, my phone rang. Daniel's name flashed on the screen, and my heart stuttered. I answered, my voice cautious. "Hello, Mom," he said, and there was something in his tone, something raw, unsteady. "Can I come over? I need to talk to you." The knock on my door came sooner than I expected. Daniel stood there, his coat dusted with the first frost of the season, his face drawn and uncertain. He looked like the boy I remembered, the one who'd come to me after a bad day at school, seeking comfort in my arms. But he was different now, older, carrying the weight of a life I wasn't fully part of anymore. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. The apartment felt small with him in it, his presence filling the space like it always had. He sat on the couch, his hands clasped tightly in his lap, and I took the armchair across from him, waiting. The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken words, until he finally spoke. "Mom, I'm sorry." His voice cracked, and he looked down at his hands. That night, at the housewarming, what I said, it was stupid. I didn't mean it. I stayed quiet, letting him continue. My heart wanted to rush to him, to forgive him instantly, but the hurt was still there, raw and real. I needed to hear him, to understand. "It was a dumb joke," he said, his eyes meeting mine for the first time. They were glassy, rimmed with regret. I was trying to be funny, to impress everyone. And I didn't think about how it would sound to you. Claire told me about the quilt, how much it meant. I looked at it, really looked at it, and I saw all the pieces me old blanket, the jersey, everything, and I realized how much I'd hurt you. I nodded, my throat tight. It wasn't just the words. Daniel, I said softly. It was the way you said them. Like I was nothing. Like everything we've been through was just a footnote. He flinched, and I saw the boy again. The one who'd once apologized for breaking my favorite mug with the same earnestness. You're not a footnote, Mom. You're everything. I wouldn't be here, none of this would exist without you. I got caught up in the moment, in this new life, and I lost sight of that. His words were a balm, but they didn't erase the ache entirely. I leaned forward, my hands clasped around my knees. Daniel, I've always been proud of you. Every sacrifice, every late night. It was worth it to see you build this life. But when you called me the old tenant, it felt like you were ashamed of where we came from. Of me. He shook his head, his voice thick with emotion. I'm not ashamed. I'm proud of you. I got carried away. I wanted to fit in with those people, to prove I belonged in their world. But I see now how wrong I was. You're the one who taught me what home means. Not some fancy house, but love, sacrifice, everything you gave me. I felt tears prick my eyes, but I blinked them back. I just want to be part of your life. Daniel, not as a guest, not as a tenant, but as your mother. You are, he said, his voice breaking. He stood and crossed the room, kneeling in front of me, his hands reaching for mine. You always will be. I promise. I'll do better. I'll make this right. For the first time that evening, I let myself believe him. I squeezed his hands, feeling the warmth of his fingers, the connection that had always been there, even when it felt lost. I know you will, I said. But it's not just about words, Daniel. It's about remembering who we are to each other. He nodded, his eyes searching mine. Can I stay for a bit? Maybe. Tell me about the quilt. I want to know everything. I smiled, a real smile this time, and patted the seat beside me. Sit. Let me show you. As I unfolded the quilt across the couch, I pointed to each square, telling him the stories behind them: the blue blanket he'd clung to as a toddler, the red jersey he'd worn with pride, the green scarf that had been my first taste of his success. He listened, really listened, his eyes wide with recognition, his laughter soft and genuine. For the first time in a long time, it felt like we were us again, mother and son, tethered by love and memory. When he left that night, he hugged me tightly, the quilt tucked under his arm. I'm hanging this in the living room, he said, right where everyone can see it. It's not just a gift, Mom. It's our story. I watched him drive away, the frost glittering under the streetlights, and felt a warmth settle in my chest. The hurt wasn't gone, not entirely, but it was softer now, overlaid with hope. Daniel had seen me, really seen me, and that was enough for tonight. The weeks that followed Daniel's visit were tentative, like the first green shoots after a long winter. We didn't fall back into the easy rhythm of our past. Too much had changed for that, but we were trying. He called more often, short conversations about his work or Claire's latest recipe, and I cherished each one, no matter how small. When he invited me to dinner at their house, just the three of us, I felt a flicker of nervousness. Would it be different this time? Or would I still feel like a guest? The evening was crisp, the autumn leaves crunching under my feet as I approached their doorstep. Claire greeted me with a warm hug, her smile genuine. Evelyn, I'm so glad you're here, she said, taking my coat. The house smelled of roasted garlic and rosemary, and I noticed the quilt draped over the back of the couch. its colors vibrant against the modern decor. My heart lifted at the sight. Daniel was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of sauce. His sleeves rolled up. "Mom, you're just in time," he said, his grin boyish and familiar. "Claire's teaching me how to make her famous pasta. I'm probably ruining it." "You're doing fine," Claire teased, nudging him. There was an ease between them, a partnership that made me proud. We sat down to dinner, the table set with care, and the conversation flowed about their wedding plans. My book club, the stray cat I'd been feeding at the complex. For the first time, I didn't feel like an outsider. I felt like family. After dinner, Daniel poured us coffee, and we moved to the living room. The quilt caught my eye again, and I couldn't help but ask, "You really hung it up?" "Of course," Daniel said, his tone serious. "It's the best thing in this house. Every time I look at it, I think of you, everything you did for me." I showed it to some friends the other day, told them the stories behind it. They were blown away. Claire nodded, her eyes soft. "It's more than just a quilt, Evelyn. It's like a piece of history. I hope you'll teach me how to make one someday." I smiled, touched by her words. "I'd love that, Claire. It's not just about sewing, it's about telling a story with every stitch." As the evening wound down, Daniel walked me to my car. The night was clear, the stars sharp against the sky. "Mom," he said, pausing by the driver's door, "I'm still sorry about the housewarming. I know it's not something I can undo with one apology, but I want you to know I'm trying. I don't ever want you to feel like you don't belong here." I reached up, touching his cheek, the way I used to when he was small. "I know, Daniel. And I'm here. Always. We'll figure this out together." He hugged me, long and tight, and I felt the years melt away, just for a moment. As I drove home, the road illuminated by my headlights, I thought about the quilt, how each square, each stitch, was a piece of us. Imperfect, but enduring. We weren't perfect, Daniel and I, but we were bound by something stronger than words. Something that could weather even the deepest hurts. Back at my apartment, I started a new project, a scarf for Claire, in shades of auburn and gold to match her hair. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a step towards something Nawal way to weave her into our story. 2. Time has a way of softening sharp edges, and the months that followed brought a quiet healing. Daniel and I found a new rhythm. Not the same as before, but steady. Like a heartbeat. He'd drop by my apartment unannounced. Sometimes with Claire. Sometimes alone. Bringing takeout or a new book he thought I'd like. We'd talk. Laugh. And sometimes sit in comfortable silence. The kind that only comes from knowing someone deeply. One spring afternoon, Daniel called with a request. "Mom, we're having a small get-together at Backlight, and we'd love for you to come. Nothing big. Just some friends. Good food. I want you to be there not as a guest, but as, well, you know, you." I hesitated, the memory of the housewarming still lingering. But his voice was earnest, and I could hear the effort behind it. "I'll be there," I said, and I meant it. The gathering was different from the housewarming, smaller, warmer, with faces I recognized from Daniel's stories. The quilt was still on the couch, now joined by a few throw pillows Claire had made. Inspired by my stitching, I felt a swell of pride seeing our work side by side, a bridge between generations. As the evening unfolded, Daniel raised a glass, his eyes finding mine across the room. "I want to make a toast," he said, his voice steady. "To my mom, Evelyn, who taught me what home really means. Not just a place, but the people who make it matter. This house wouldn't be a home without her." The room clapped, and I felt my cheeks flush. Not from embarrassment, but from a warmth I hadn't felt in a long time. Daniel crossed the room, pulling me into a hug. And the guests raised their glasses, their smiles genuine. For the first time, I didn't feel like the old tenant. I felt like the heart of the home, the root of the story we were still writing. Later, as we cleaned up, Claire handed me a small box. "This is from both of us," she said. Inside was a pendant, a tiny silver house with a heart etched into it. "We want you to know you're always home with us," she said, her eyes bright. I wore the pendant every day after that, a reminder of the bond we'd rebuilt. Daniel and I still had our moments' misunderstandings. Busy schedules, but we faced them together, with honesty and care. The quilt remained a centerpiece in their home, a testament to our journey. And I started teaching Claire how to sew. Our afternoons filled with laughter and stories. By the time Daniel and Claire's wedding rolled around, our relationship felt stronger than ever. The ceremony was beautiful, held in a garden bursting with summer blooms. And I stood proudly as the mother of the groom, my pendant glinting in the sunlight. During the reception, Daniel pulled me aside, his eyes bright with emotion. "Mom, I want you to know something," he said, his voice low so only I could hear. "Everything I am, everything I've built, it's because of you. I was an idiot that night at the housewarming, but I promise I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you know how much you mean to me." I squeezed his hand, tears blurring my vision. "You already have. Daniel, you're my home, too." As we danced under the twinkling lights, I thought about the quilt, the pendant, the years of love and struggle that had brought us here. Life wasn't perfect, it never is, but it was ours, stitched together with care. Each moment a thread in a story that would keep unfolding. Years later, when I sat in my armchair, older and slower but content, I'd look at the photos from that wedding, from the gatherings that followed, from the quiet dinners with Daniel and Claire. I'd touch the pendant around my neck and smile, knowing that no matter where life took us, we'd always find our way back to each other. The old tenant was gone, replaced by a mother, a friend, a cornerstone of a family that grew stronger with every stitch.